What we're talking about here today is 10 things that I personally changed in my running, and it's not things that I necessarily added in, it's things that I more took away. And of course, there's a little bit of give and take. If you take something out, you might add something else different. It's just a way to kind of express it. And these are things that not only I've done, but things that while coaching you and while looking at other athletes and looking at elite athletes too, I've got 10 things I'm gonna share with you. I'm gonna spend about 90 seconds to 2 minutes on each one. So here we go. The first one is not warming up hard enough. Now, I used to think, and a lot of beginning runners think this as well, you see this in high school, and this is really where I'm going in my mind when I think about this. In high school, I used to think we have a gas tank, and you're running a race, so you want to save the gas in that gas tank for the race and burn it all up during the race. And it's a nice analogy, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because you're not an automobile with a gas tank, you have multiple gas tanks that can go and go and go for a very long time. So when it comes to warming up, the shorter the distance that you're racing, the more you want to warm up. And think about this for like a 100-meter sprint. Are they just going into it cold and trying to save that gas tank, or are they warming up maybe for an hour or maybe more? And then even for a 5K, 10K, you want to warm up more, harder than you probably think. Now, where does that stop? When do you want to stop warming up a lot? It's probably at about the marathon for most runners, because if you're getting into a point where the race that you're going to do, just completing that race is going to take most of your energy. And for a lot of people, myself included, that's a marathon. Longer than a marathon, of course. So for a marathon, you want to warm up just as much as you need to make sure that you're not like straining a muscle when the gun goes off. So a little bit of a warm up, a tiny bit of a warm up. But below that, a half marathon, you might even want to warm up 3, 4, 5 miles. I remember the first time that I warmed up 5 miles for a half marathon and then ran a PR in that half marathon. It was on Cape Cod in 2011, I think it was. So don't be afraid to warm up. You want to warm up not just more, but also faster than you think you might want, especially if you're running a middle distance event. So a half marathon, but like 10K, 5K, it depends on your experience as a runner, but you might warm up several miles, then do some strides, then do a couple of 200s or 400s even at race pace, and now you're warmed up. So that's number one. Number two is going out too fast. Going out too fast is something that we all do dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times. Now, you'll see this in high school, maybe even college, but if you go to a high school track meet, no matter the race that you look at, 800, mile, 2 mile, whatever, basically, I could almost guarantee you that every single runner, boy or girl, is gonna go out too fast. That first lap is the fastest one of the entire race. And if it's a 2 mile, their first mile, probably faster than their second mile. We just see this across the board. And I don't blame you for doing it. You have your nerves going. You feel really good. You're the most fresh at the beginning of your race, so going faster feels easier. Okay, it kind of makes sense, but then you blow up. Or even if you don't blow up, you slow down just a little bit, and we're not doing a negative split. A negative split is quite tricky to do because, of course, you're running the second half faster than the first half. That's the definition of a negative split. But because you're going relatively slower, or at least even paced, but you're going slower in the first half, when you feel the most fresh, it feels like you're going so much slower that it's ridiculous. It's a cakewalk, as my high school track coach used to say. Don't take any cakewalks out there. And so we go too fast. Now you can kind of get away with it when you're younger because the races are so short, they're just over, you'll recover. But if you're running a marathon and you go out too fast, what does that lead to? It not only slows you down, but you might now hit the wall when you otherwise wouldn't have hit the wall. And then your slowdown becomes a blow up and you slow down by a lot, maybe minutes or many minutes in your last miles. And that kind of sucks. So going out too fast is the second mistake. Don't do that. This isn't like a giant problem, but with almost everybody who I coach, we look at pacing and I'd say about like half the time runners are going out too fast, or they're going out faster than they averaged for the whole race. But with the bulk of runners, if you just sample 1,000 random runners in your town, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's going to be like more than 80%, probably like over 90% of runners in any given race, 5K to the marathon, they're just going to go out too fast. Number 3 is caffeine supplements. Now, we're going to talk about caffeine here in 2 different ways. First, with a little story. When I was in college, I was looking to get whatever edge I could in my 5K, my 10K, and my steeplechase, as you are too with your races. So I tried all kinds of things, but I read about the effects of caffeine supplementation. And I didn't drink coffee. Maybe I just didn't have it available. I didn't have coffee in college. So I went to a gas station and I got no-dose tabs. I got caffeine tablets that like truckers use sometimes. And I figured, hey, it's not going to hurt. I read the studies that caffeine can help your performance. So I took these caffeine pills and I ran the 5K. And I ran the slowest time that I ran in my entire collegiate career in the 5K. On that particular day where I ran really slow in college, it was also really hot. I remember it was blazing hot and I had caffeine. Now that's not a good combination. If it's really hot, you might want to stay away from the caffeine. Caffeine does a number of things in your body, but one of them is it's going to impede blood flow. It's a vasoconstrictor. So you can't dissipate heat as well. That's not good if it's hot. Now, if it's cold, it's gonna negatively affect you less. But sometimes either you or different runners may have a benefit from caffeine and some may not. Now, I'm gonna read to you a section I have in the book on a study that was called Caffeine and Endurance Performance in Athletes. Now, what they did was they gave runners either 2 milligrams or 4 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight. So it was either a low dose or a moderate dose. There's also higher doses you can do. They didn't do that. On average, the caffeine increased performance by 3% at the 4 milligrams, but not at all at the 2 milligrams. So we could look at that and say, okay, 4 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight improves performance. You could say that. But if we look deeper into that research there, some of the runners had a 6.8% improvement and others had a 13.7% decrease in performance. Now that's really interesting. So what's the difference between the two? The difference is that it depends on a gene that you may or may not have. It's a gene that makes an enzyme that metabolizes caffeine in your liver. There's 3 different kinds of metabolizers. There's fast, medium, and slow. They're called the AA genotype, the AC, or the CC. Now, you can actually get tested to see if you have this gene. It's called the CYP1A2 gene. You don't need to remember that. But if you metabolize caffeine fast, you're a fast metabolizer, then caffeine improves your performance. If you're a slow metabolizer, it impedes your performance. So you can get this test done if you want. It costs about $100. I looked up a bunch of places just to give you some cliff notes. Affinity DNA USA, Ancestry DNA, Dynamic DNA, and Genomic Express. Those are just some I found with a Google search. But you might get a sense of this just by looking at how you react to caffeine. If you take caffeine and you feel jittery, nervous, sweaty, if it impedes your sleep, then you are probably a slow metabolizer. That's me. If it has almost no effect on you, not just because you've built up a tolerance, but if you don't have caffeine for a while and then you have it and it doesn't really make that much of a difference, you just feel good, you're probably a fast metabolizer. I've used a lot of massage guns in my life, and this one is by far the best. It's by Bob and Brad. Now, it comes with attachments that you can use that either will make it hot or cold, or you can do it as I use it with just the standard tip on this, but it's like a nice pointed tip that gets right deep into your muscles. It comes in a box that looks like this. It's pretty awesome, and I've got a coupon code for you in the description below. And number 4 is poor sleep. Poor sleep. I stopped doing this, and you might want to as well. The way that I did it's a little bit different than for most people. For most people, I recommend that they just get more sleep. Sometimes easier said than done, right? It sounds kind of cheap. Yeah, get more sleep. I would if I could. Well, maybe you can. Maybe. I don't know. It's your life to govern, right? But what are your priorities? If something really is more important than sleep and you don't get the sleep, okay, like maybe your family or your job or something like that. But is there anything long-term? What else is really more important than consistent good sleep? I don't know. That's for you to decide. But for me personally, when I was in 9th grade, I remember looking at the clock and thinking, I have to get the bus at 5:15. And I want 8 hours of sleep. I decided that going to school while tired, I decided that life really wasn't worth living if I was tired all the time. I just didn't like how it felt at all. So I decided I need to go to bed at 9:15. And I remember having the TV on and watching a documentary that I really liked on the Discovery Channel on aliens. It was really cool. And it was 9:14 and I really wanted to watch it. It went from 9 to 10. And when 9:15 clicked, I turned it off and went to bed. I've always prioritized getting sleep. Okay, great. I'll pat myself on the back for that. But what I'm talking about here is not just normal sleep, but for me at least, it was sleep as recovery. So when you do a big workout, a big marathon pace workout or race a marathon, or for me, I run ultras. On Saturday, I ran 4.5 hours on the trails. I was kind of tired, so I slept 10 hours on Saturday night. For me, it's about recovery, getting even more sleep after a big run, a big training week, or a big race, or a big workout. Recovery sleep. Because if you want to get back at it and do that run again the next weekend, you got to recover. So moving on. Another mistake that I was making that I stopped is trying to PR all the time. Because if you've been running for a long time, again, back to high school, I actually did PR almost every time in the mile and the 2 mile and whatever race it was. Why? Because I was simply growing. You're getting bigger, stronger, more mature as a runner. You just get better. In high school, you actually can PR almost all the time, sometimes. And in college, sort of, when you're beginning running, in your first decade of running, you can PR a lot. And if you have that expectation, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And you're chasing the time on the clock, and it just has to get better all the time, or you're not satisfied. So go ahead and get the PR. But the way I visualize it now is I'll train for a season and try to get, at the end of that season, a PR. And now I just have taken that away completely. And I'll tell you, like personally, I just feel like running is so much more enjoyable. Since I've moved to ultra running about 13 years ago, I don't go for PRs unless I'm running the same course I've done before, because the courses are all so different. Some of them might be 50 mile, but one of them was flat. One of them had 8,000 feet of gain. of course you're going to run slower. So it doesn't really matter. Taking the pressure away. So take away from that what you will, but consider having other outcomes other than just the PR. Go for the PR, but maybe less frequently, maybe not all the time. Okay, the next one is complaining before and during a race. Oh boy, you see this all the time. And the slower the race is, the more you see this. When runners have enough time to be able to talk with each other, so like a marathon or longer, if you're running a 5K, you're kind of out of breath and you're just focusing. But when you can talk, you hear runners talking in the corral and in the race. In a marathon, they'll run 1 mile and they'll say 1 mile down and they'll say like just 25.2 to go. Hope I don't die. It's not just like a playful thing they're saying. They're kind of saying it like they don't want to be there or like it's ridiculous or like it's too hard. We like play these games with ourselves that we think we're being funny. Maybe it is funny. I mean, it kind of is, right? But also there's a subtle sub-communication there that you either suck or you can't do it, or you went out too fast. And you're kind of like saying that in a jest way, so people laugh, but you're telling yourself subconsciously that you're going too fast, that you're gonna die, that you don't wanna be there. And that subconscious talk is really powerful. There's a guy, Nate Jenkins. He was one of America's top marathoners about 20 years ago. And he said, no matter what it is, you just find the positive. So he said, like, if it's hot, if it's really hot, you just say, it'll be easy to stay loose. Or if it's really cold, you say, I need less hydration. Yes, you just find that. And it's not about lying to yourself. It's about actually thinking, having those thoughts and cultivating those kinds of thoughts and that focus. And next is I stopped most supplements. I used to take protein recovery this and performance that and gel this and chomp that and bars. For goodness sake, I ate power bars every day of my life for like 8 years. And I don't do any of those anymore, hardly any. Occasionally I'll have granola bars or something like that. But I just migrated to eating actual food. What a novel idea. Eat food. We don't need all of these supplements. And we think we do because they have electrolytes and they have carbohydrates. You know what else has electrolytes and carbohydrates, but also water? Food. Depends what you're eating. If you're eating fried bacon, maybe take the supplement bar instead. But a mango or some fresh juice or a smoothie or potatoes or something like that, that's a food. It gives you the glucose, it gives you the fructose. And if you're eating fruit, for example, you also get enzymes, you also get water, you also get fiber. These are foods that our body's designed to use. So I stopped using supplements. Some supplements I do use are creatine, and I do have a video coming up for you on creatine. I use B12 supplement, and I occasionally use zinc supplement as well. Okay, we got a couple to go. Next thing I stopped doing was spaghetti dinners before a race. Once again, in high school, it was really fun. Maybe you do this with your friends sometimes, and if you've been running for a long time since school, we used to get together as a team and have spaghetti dinner. The idea is to carbo load before a race. Now, it's a good idea to carbo load, but there's a couple of problems here. The first is just the mindset that you need to carbo load. What if you were just carbo loaded all the time? Because you eat a high carbohydrate diet. Then you don't need to carbo load. If we acknowledge that doing that increases performance and recovery, why wouldn't we just do that during our training? But the second is spaghetti dinner in particular. It's not so much the spaghetti that I'm gonna raise a flag with. Although I'd rather eat a whole food, sweet potatoes or something like that. But it's the stuff we put on top of it. So if you go to like a marathon and they have the social dinner the night before, they'll have spaghetti. Oh yeah, they will. But then they'll have sauce, and that sauce has oil in it and probably sugar and probably a bunch of salt. And then on top of that, you can put meat sauce, which has more saturated fat and cholesterol and more salt and more fat. And then what do we put on top of it at the end? Parmesan cheese, which is, let's see, more saturated fat, more cholesterol, more salt. So we're not even carbohydrate loading. If you look at a spaghetti dinner that has meat sauce and Parmesan cheese on it, then it's actually a high fat meal. It's not even high carb. So I'm not saying don't carb up. I'm saying carb up on food all the time when you're training, especially, and then omit the high fat, high salt meal right before your run. Then sometimes at those dinners, they'll have a salad, but they'll put dressing on top, and the dressing is of course oil, and maybe they put cheese on top of that. So once again, it's high fat. And they think they're eating high carbohydrate, actually eating high fat. Let's not do that. Let's actually eat high carbohydrate. So you can tweak that. You could have spaghetti dinner with tomato sauce that's oil-free. Yay, no cheese. There you go. That would work. Okay, second to last is tapering too long. Tapering does work. There's a whole chapter in your Run Elite book on tapering. I'm not saying that tapering doesn't work. What I'm saying is that if you need to taper, by definition, doesn't it? It means that you've overtrained. Otherwise, why taper? You're tapering so that you can get a deeper recovery that you haven't allowed yourself yet to get. So you're hoping to get that super compensation, okay? If you need a taper, by all means, take a taper. If your race is coming up and your sleep is disturbed, you feel sore, you feel tired, you feel lethargic, you should probably taper. But a better approach would be to recover during your training so that you don't need a taper. And that would come down to better sleep, which brings us all the way back to one of our first points here, better nutrition. You're gonna increase your recovery. And then occasionally taking a day off, 2 days off, or a down week, or a down couple of weeks, that's just a little bit down. So you get that recovery in your training, because ultimately we want to look at the law of specificity. As you get closer to your race, if it's a marathon or longer, you're running long. So law of specificity, why would we want to run less leading into a race where we're going to run long? It's the opposite of what we want to do. We want to run long, high volume, long runs, provided that you can recover from it. So I do recommend very small tapers. I call them mini tapers, just 3 days. If you're well recovered during your training, we just take the edge off for about 3 days and you'll be fine. And we see this in most elite runners. That's what they're doing. The best example I can think of is Bill Rogers, who used to take a 3-day mini taper, but he'd still run full volume the week leading up to a race. And then he'd win things like the Boston Marathon and come back 5 days later and run the Cape Cod, what's the town in Cape Cod? I can't remember. I used to live there. He ran the 7-mile road race there that's like really prestigious. And he won the Boston Marathon, came back 5 days later, ran the 7-mile and set a course record. So he won course record. No taper. And I love that because he didn't taper into the marathon, but he also continued training between the marathon and the 7-mile and still set a course record. So there was no deep recovery. Why? Because he's used to this volume and he recovers along the way. And the last one, the final one here for you, is taking uphills too hard, which costs you your downhills. This is really just about learning your own personal strengths. But hardly anybody is going to be so good at the uphills that they can charge them so hard that they cost themselves the downhill. We probably shouldn't do that, because regardless if you're strong on the uphill or the downhill, you get free distance on the downhill. So if you wear yourself out, even just a little bit on the uphill, when the downhill comes, you're losing the opportunity to be able to fly on the downhill, where you get free distance. Remember, every time you jump off the ground and you're in your flight phase, that's free distance that you travel. Now, if you're going downhill, that flight phase is longer. So you literally have free distance. That's why you can run faster downhill than you can uphill. So let's stop crushing the uphills to try to be a badass. You can do this from like a psychological, mental point of view, but whatever you do, you just don't want to rob your ability to really kill it on the downhills, because you can make up so much more time there. I hope you found these points valuable. I spent some time thinking about these. I have a longer list, but I came up with these because these are the ones that I actually have made a change in my running and have only made me a better runner. And I think with most of these, you're going to see elite runners doing the same. They're not going out too fast. They're not doing a very slow, unuseful warm-up. They're not complaining. They're normally pretty positive. They're not trying to PR all the time. They're not tapering for 3 weeks, and they're not burning themselves out on the uphills and sacrificing their ability to kill it in the downhills. If you want to learn more about these techniques, you can read about these in the Run Elite book as well. If you haven't heard of the Run Elite book, it's doing exceptionally well on Amazon right now. Just read the reviews. You're gonna love this. Pick up your copy. You can get it on audio as well. I recorded the audio myself. I hope I did a really good job on that. It's entertaining, it's fun, and it's a cheap way to learn these hacks and more at a deep level so you can improve your race, be it from the 1500 meters to the marathon and beyond to the ultras. This has been Andrew Snow with Run Elite. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you on the next video.